Okay, so today I thought I would talk about, well, one, I'd like to promote a YouTube video that I saw on the 31st of last month that I thought deserves some more attention to people who may not normally watch this content creator's normal shtick, but also I'd like just to talk about Lovecraft. But first, I'd like to talk about the content creator, Weaponized Nerd Rage. He is, well, yeah, I would call him a lovable jackass. He does things that normally I would think, this guy's a jackass in a negative way, but he's very entertaining and he has some good taste in movies. And plus, I think he plans on having a career in the entertainment industry, which I'm all for. We need more like him, people who are sane. But anyway, what he did was on the 31st, he posted a video that I had been waiting for maybe a month or two or weeks. And the reason why he ended up making this, what did I say, movie or video? Well, I meant to say video. And this kind of ties into Lovecraft. And I'll say before the video was made, Lovecraft has this annoying habit of being attacked repeatedly by a bunch of schmucks who, quite honestly, I think don't really give a shit about what he does. They just want someone to attack and destroy because they are, as Heel versus Babyface once said, they are a bunch of spiteful, jealous. Well, actually, I can't remember the whole thing. My interpretation is they're a bunch of spiteful, jealous egomaniacs who will never contribute to anything to society, so they have to tear someone else down and try to erase him from history. Like, well, yeah, they're acting like Stalin, basically. Anytime they want to erase his name from history. That's what Stalin did if you weren't politically correct. He would erase people and send them to gulags. It was like they never existed. But anyway, he made this video, I guess, as a response to all that, because I remember before this, there was a Hugo Awards. Lovecraft got one posthumously for his creation of the Cthulhu mythos. And if you don't know what that is, think of cosmic horror. And also, there's this being called Cthulhu. And he's not, I think, the main one, but he's the one that everyone knows because of the Cthulhu mythos or something like that. I'm still, like, I've been into him for a while, but I'm not the biggest nerd for what he is, and I'm still learning about the mythos. My personal favorite would probably be Nyarlathotep, I believe is his name, the Crawling Chaos. Interesting character. But yeah, Cthulhu's like, imagine if God and the devil were one and the same. That's Cthulhu in a nutshell, only he's a giant. He has an octopus for a head, and he has dragon wings, and other things I can't describe. And what Lovecraft did was he wrote about horror that drove people mad, like knowing the truth could drive you crazy. And this was one of many themes he would use. He had themes of forbidden knowledge, the ideas of inherent guilt, like the sins of your ancestors coming back to bite you in the ass. Excuse me. And the idea of just things that are beyond our ken are probably not worth finding. They would probably drive us mad. Like, think of it this way. If Nietzsche was the one that said God is dead and we have killed him, Lovecraft is the one who said, oh, he's not dead, he's very much alive. We're just so insignificant, he probably doesn't give a shit about us. He'd probably kill us if he knew we existed. Or something like that. And I'm taking that from another YouTuber. I can't remember their name. If you've seen them, though, please tell me in the comments so I can give him a mention in some links. But that's basically how Lovecraft's mythos kind of was. And when he was given this award posthumously by the Hugos, he was attacked. And people also tried to compare him to people like J.K. Rowling for stupid reasons. And I will say this unequivocally, and screw the consequences. The only thing that Lovecraft has in common with J.K. Rowling is that they're both authors. That is it. I consider Harry Potter to be kind of overrated. I used to like it when I was a kid, but as I've gotten older, it's gotten stale on me. Not liking Radcliffe probably doesn't help. Anyway, this video that Weaponized Nerd Rage did months later is kind of like a defense of Lovecraft. And here's the thing about Lovecraft I think never gets stressed enough. The man was born a century ago. And if you don't believe, and if you're one of those people who says it doesn't matter what time you were born, this should be universal knowledge. Okay, this guy had a miserable life. He was born in a period when racism was normal. Actually, he was actually, I think, worse, supposedly. Some stories are that he was a little bit more racist by an inch than the rest of society. But I don't think he was racist. I think he was just xenophobic, because if you were not of New England, of England descent, or of Protestant Rhode Island, he thought you were subhuman, to my knowledge. Though he was able to have friends who did not meet this criteria. One example would be his wife, and one of his small circle of author friends. They were both Jewish. Lovecraft was known once for being anti-Semitic. I think he got over that. Mainly because near the end of his life, he began to travel outside Providence, Rhode Island, and his views began to expand and broadened his horizon. He began to change. He is an example that, yes, some people change. That's how I look at Lovecraft. That is a hopeful thing, that people can be changed. This one Daryl guy does. He goes around de-radicalizing Klansmen members. Though he's, actually, no, screw that. I'm not going to go into that. But Lovecraft is, to me, someone I can actually empathize with. I didn't have a miserable life like him, but there are certain things I can empathize with, like the fact he never had a good thing to say about his own work. Anything I've written, I have never had anything nice to say about it. I look down on my own work with contempt. The only difference is, I think he did that as a version of manners. I do it as a personality defect. Well, actually, no, I kind of see it as a form of manners, too. Another thing was, I kind of pity this guy. He had a miserable life. His dad was sent to a mental asylum when he was a kid, and he never left the place alive. He actually died there, and he was sent there because he was acting crazy because of syphilis he contracted. And Lovecraft barely knew him, I guess. And his father was basically abandoned there by the family. He lost his grandparents. His mother went insane. She died in the same mental hospital her husband died in from a botched gallbladder surgery. His best friend, Robert E. Howard's the author of Conan the Barbarian and Solomon Kane. He killed himself. And on top of all that, Lovecraft got cancer. This man had a miserable life, and he died thinking he was a failure, that he would be forgotten by history, unaware of the impact he would have on horror in the present, which is kind of sad. I think it wasn't until the 70s or the 80s that his work really caught on, and the only reason his work continued to survive that long was because his friend August Derleth, he was responsible for that. He kept his work in the public consciousness long enough for it to one day find the audience it would one day get. And this is all stuff Weaponized Nerd Rage talked about in his video. And it's also some stuff I find really fascinating because for a guy who wrote about horror, this guy's life was a tragedy. Like, you know how Arthur Fleck once said, I used to think my life was a tragedy, but it's really a comedy, or something like that. Lovecraft was the reverse. Only instead of thinking his life was a comedy, he just thought life was life. He tried to live it. And life kept kicking him, and when he was down, it continued to kick him. I think a lot of people should be able to empathize with that, with what he went through. Because we all have bad days. We all have days where we're just like, what is the point? Life keeps kicking me down. Why do I even try? The only difference is this guy continued regardless. One story I heard was that he told his wife, even if people didn't like what he wrote, he'd still continue writing because he enjoyed it. He was also, as Weaponized Nerd Rage pointed out, a believer in art for art's sake, which is something I wish we had more of, because I want more people like that who think, I'm going to do something for the sake of doing it. He was, how do I put this? He believed in, like the guy, when he was a kid, he read about all these old poets and authors from the previous century, and he fell in love with that century. He wishes he had been born then. And that's where he formed the basis of what he thought a gentleman should be, what a New England gentleman should be, and that's how he became the person he became for a while. That changed over time, and he began to regret some of his own writing, like Red Hook. But the people who attack him don't care about that. They just see something to tear down in a self-righteous crusade like a bunch of soccer moms and Karens and busybodies. And I have no other words to describe it without getting vulgar, but it is annoying seeing this guy constantly attacked. And I would have expected to hear people say one day they want to just dig up his body and burn his skeleton to the ground or destroy his tombstone, which they will get to eventually. I do not doubt that for a second. I would bet money on it. Anyway, this video, I think, was a good video he did. Weaponized Nerd Rage is probably one of my favorite YouTubers. He's like in the hierarchy of my favorite YouTubers, he's in second place, right under Razor Fist, but right above Vader Reviews, and all three of which I cannot recommend vociferously enough. But I think this is probably one of his best videos, in my opinion, because it delves into information I would like, that I'm trying to currently read in Lovecraft's biography, I Am Providence. There's also another good book about the letters between him and Robert E. Howard called A Means to Freedom, which I would recommend, but I still haven't gotten that far in either one of them. But if you are interested, these are two books I recommend looking up. They'll probably cost a shitload, though. But back to Lovecraft, the main thing that I think people love to ignore conveniently is that this guy had a horrible life, and he gave as much as he got. He misplaced his own problems onto the world, as his own mother misplaced the death of her husband, onto Lovecraft. And if anything, I think Lovecraft deserves pity, like a lot of people, especially authors, who, honestly, I think if they hadn't suffered the way they suffered, they might not have been able to give as much good as they did. Like Edgar Allan Poe, he also had a miserable life, who was also a favorite of Lovecraft's. But Poe's life did not sound that great. It sounded miserable and depressing and sad. Lovecraft, he didn't have a lot of friends. He struggled socially in some ways. Although a funny thing is, the authors of the pulp era that he was in, a lot of them were his friends. Robert Bloch, August Derleth, Robert E. Howard, and that's just to name a few that I know of. And there were letters between all these guys, and the funny thing about Lovecraft was he wrote copious amounts of pages to them, and they were all good, but that's beside the point. Another thing, well, now just to get back to the main point, is this guy's life was tragic. It was sad. He needed help, just like his mother needed help, and neither one of them got the help they needed at the time. And Lovecraft needed kindness. That's what a lot of people, I think, need to be shown. Kindness, not to be called every name under the sun, not to be insulted and threatened by people. One of the reasons that Weaponized Nerd Rage pointed out was for him changing was his friends challenged his views, made him think differently, and when science no longer validated his own thoughts, because some of Lovecraft's racism and xenophobia was based on pseudoscience that could later be disproven. Once science no longer backed up what he believed, Lovecraft's opinions changed. For better or worse, he was capable of change. He was a human. He made mistakes. He deserves the right to have the opportunity to make those mistakes and learn from them. More importantly, I think he deserved the right at redemption, which I do believe he earned, just as much as he earned his following and the legacy that he has. This man suffered and he changed over time, but to the social justice mob or the Karens of the world, you don't get to change. You're guilty, you're damned. It's like a religious cult. And it annoys the crap out of me because I've made mistakes. Any of you who've watched your video, if you have not made a mistake, please feel free to tell me. But can you honestly say with a straight face you've never done something you regret or that society would look down on you for? I have. I've stolen things. Granted, it was a neighbor's crystal, but that was about it. Well, then, well, actually, no. I don't want to get arrested. But, yeah, when I was a kid, I took stuff that I shouldn't have. I said things I shouldn't have. Hell, I still say stuff I shouldn't have. And I regret it to some degree. Not that it matters, because to the person I've said those things to, my apology isn't good enough. To these people who attack Lovecraft, his redemption isn't good enough. And it's disgusting. This man, as I point out, he had a tragic and miserable life. He deserves some amount of understanding. And I know that's a tall order for people now who have a lack of empathy now, but it's just sad. To the people who attack Lovecraft, get help. And I'm not saying this to be mean-spirited. I mean genuinely, you need help. It's not healthy to run around with all that hate in your heart. Which is a bit hypocritical coming from me, because I'm a hateful piece of shit. I can say that with a straight face. I hate a lot of things. I don't like a lot of things. I rarely like things. It'd probably be easier to make a list of things I like and I don't hate. Although, I will say this, I do think the people who attack Lovecraft are evil, or at the very least are borderline evil. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. The main point of this video is that, and I'll be leaving a link to it in here, but watch the video. If you're interested in Lovecraft, if you're interested in learning about his life more, watch it. It's called H.P. Lovecraft in Defense, I believe, or something. If that doesn't do it for you, there's also a good documentary on him called Fear of the Unknown, or Fear of the Unknown. Great documentary. It has the guy who made Reanimator, who died a couple months back. It has Gideon, or Gaiman, the guy who made Sandman and American Gods. It even has the guy who wrote his biography, or Lovecraft's biography, not Gaiman's. But yeah, that's the main point, and I know I'm rambling on a bit, but this is something I genuinely give a shit about. I mean, my other two videos on YouTube have been, and on BitChute have been, also on stuff I give a shit about. But this one really just pisses me off to some degree. I don't know why, but it does, and it's sad. But anyway, just let me know your thoughts. Mainly because I like interacting with people. It's kind of boring when I'm just talking out into the ether and have nothing to talk back with. And if you disagree with me, I don't hold that against you. I really don't. If you don't like Lovecraft, fine, don't like him. You have that right. I'm not going to deny you that. But I would like just to, not debate, but I guess talk. Like, if you have a reason beyond, oh, he was racist, then yeah, I would like to talk to people about that. I can't do a live stream or anything, but I can talk to you in the comments about it. And yeah, just let me know your thoughts. I like Mad Mike. I like to read them, and yeah, have a nice day. Remember, the game was rigged from the start.